is now off hold.
Camera's off, no, the sound is off. So you're free to run your mouth right now. Oh, joy.
John Wilson.
Evening, John. I heard you.
How you?
Make sure you know that we can hear you.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Right.
I'm hearing Valerie.
Hello.
Randy Viens.
That's one pussy now.
Kevin Charbonneau.
Nice. Oh, Tom Eamon's here. Good.
Leanne Woolard.
Randy Viens.
I
cannot hear.
Tom Amons, who is listening in, lives in the first house. He left listening in. He's not here all the time, unfortunately, but.
Joseph Gresser. Okay, I have 6:30 p.m. I'm going to call the Newport City Council meeting to order for Monday, February 8th, 2021. I ask that if you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. I'm getting a large amount of feedback, and so if you wish to speak, please unmute at the time. Also, I just wanted to let everyone know that this meeting is being taped by NEK-TV. I worked with Todd Frano and we figured out what was happening and why they were getting disconnected. The reason is they were connecting an hour before the meeting and there was a timer set in this conference call software so that after 45 minutes, if the host was not present, you would be disconnected. And so between both of us, we figured that out, and I've changed a couple settings to allow them to connect early. And so that is the reason why some of the meetings have not been taped and they were disconnected. That has now been fixed. And with that, we're going to have a public hearing related to the proposed water tower. Wayne Elliott from Aldrich and Elliott is joining us this evening. Before I get into that, I just want to say that all the city council members are present via the remote call. Others in the council room, the city manager, Laura Dogan, city clerk treasurer, Jim Johnson, public works director, Tom Bernier, police chief, Travis Bingham, fire chief, John Harlemer, and we have Pedro Grondin, who oversees the water treatment facility and the wastewater facility. They are also joining us from the council room. And now with that, we will have the public information meeting on the proposed water tower. Wayne Elliott from Aldrich and Elliott is here to present a PowerPoint, and the way this is going to work is I'm going to have Wayne go through his entire PowerPoint. I will then open up the floor to questions from members of the city, questions or comments from members of the city council and the members of the city staff. And then after that, I will open it up to anyone who has joined the call with us this evening. And with that, I'm going to share my screen, which will be Wayne's PowerPoint presentation.
Great, thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Hear me okay?
Yes, I'm going to once again ask people, if you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. I am getting some feedback. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're here for the Bongo first of two information meeting. Paul, next slide.
Oh, just a second. There.
Okay, so just to give everybody a little bit of a point of reference, the left-hand map that you can see shows the city of Newport. The dark line is the approximate limits of the city water system. And then going to the right here, you can see blown up area. To the bottom of this figure, you can see the Derby roads as you're kind of coming up the hill, going around a big curve, and if you're looking up to the left there at Palin Hill, you'll see a small drive access. The circular area in the top is what we're going to talk about primarily here tonight, is the existing Palin Hill Reservoir. That feature's been there for quite a few years. It's 163-foot diameter, provides a little bit over 1 million gallons of storage, and that's the main tank that provides the domestic and fire protection for the majority of the city water system. Next slide, Paul. So just a little background here. We're here obviously for the first public hearing tonight on February 8th, and there's going to be a second one scheduled for Monday, March 1st, also at 6:30 p.m. Next. Some details about the voting. So the in-person voting is allowed. That's going to be conducted at the City Municipal Building on Tuesday, March 2nd, excuse me, which is town meeting day. Polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. In addition to that, there will be absentee early voting. That's obviously encouraged to do that approach if preferable or workable for individuals versus the in-person voting. Ballots are available February 11th, so you can contact the city clerk. And just kind of a reminder that ballots do need to be returned back to the city by the close of polls on March 2nd, which would be 7 p.m. So we're going to talk in a lot more detail about these three items, but the proposed project includes three primary elements. We've got the work improvements for the existing Palin Hill Reservoir. The second one is the new east side elevated water storage tank, transmission main and booster pump station. And then the third major piece is the work involved with the installation of the remaining water meters. To the right again here, you can see a rough map of the city water system. Kind of the red dashed lines are each side are the limits of the service area for the existing Palin Reservoir. And if you look all the way up into the right side, you'll see Derby Road, which is the primary area we're going to be talking about for the project limits. So this is some of the history here that goes back to the late 1990s, and these are very important factors, and how the city's evaluated these improvements, and so really a main driver of why the city wants to move forward with this project, with the obviously so they can have control of their water system components and the costs moving forward. Back in the late 90s, the water main was extended from the existing Palin Hill Reservoir up Derby Road. That reservoir was not high enough in elevation to serve this area. As you know, in topography elevation, it goes uphill towards Derby. So they worked out an arrangement with the Village of Derby Center to provide the water. So that's been in place since the late 1990s. The domestic and the fire flow is basically supplied from that easterly direction from the Village of Derby water system. And of course, this connection back at that time was governed by an interlocal agreement between the Village of Derby Center and the City of Newport. Then back in 2006, the Village of Derby Center modified their water rates, and that included a reserve water allocation fee, which started to increase the cost of the city. Then back in 2007, this isn't really specific to this project, but it just provides a little bit of history here. The city was required to comply with the new arsenic limits, so that included building a new well and also a water treatment plant to remove arsenic. So again, not specific to this, but just a little bit of history with the city water system. Soon after, the Village of Derby Center imposed this reserve water allocation fee, starting in 2007 and continuing forward for at least 7 years here. This was the beginning of the litigation between the City of Newport and the Village of Derby Center over these new fee charges. A lot of time, a lot of back and forth, a lot of money spent in attorney's fees for both communities. And then finally, there was a separation settlement agreement that was negotiated in 2017. That was between the Village of Derby Center and the city. The city paid $50,000 as part of this agreement. And then another little piece of history. So there was an initial vote, first vote on this project, not quite the same scope. That was held back in November of 2017. It was for a $3 million total project cost. And probably the major difference, it did include the work, refurbishment work on the existing Palin Hill Reservoir. And it also included the elevated storage tank and the transmission main. It did not include the water meters. So that was a pretty significant difference in the project scope at the time. And as we'll get into this a little bit later here, the water meters added about $1.33 million to the total project cost. Plus you have the annual increases of cost and the construction costs since that point in time. A little background on the existing Palin Hill Reservoir. Again, this provides the domestic and fire flow protection. That's where the treated water is held for the majority of the city water system. And this is a high priority item. It's something the state's identified as a concern. The reservoir itself was built back in the 1960s. It was initially an open top reservoir. Of course, the state came in and required that all these reservoirs be covered because of the water quality issues it concerned. So the floating cover was added. The city got several years out of that. Then in the late 1990s, again, the floating cover was replaced again. And then in 2014, the state, they do frequent inspections of these water systems. So the state staff were up there going through the existing reservoir and also the water system, and they identified concerns about the age of the cover. It's a geomembrane cover, surface cover, and obviously there gets to be concerns about or effects of sunlight and other things on that. So typical life of that is 20 years. They really suggest that the city look at replacing that cover soon. And then 2019, a follow-up inspection, they reiterated this, that there's concern about this cover, geomembrane cover reaching the end of useful life, and really suggested, requested the city to start thinking seriously about replacing this cover as part of the future project. Next slide, Paul. This is a cover photo to the right here. You can see the cover. It's a geomembrane surface. There's a synthetic liner inside the lagoon or along the bottom, and that's really what kind of separates the water with the ground. But the cover is obviously there to make sure we maintain the good quality of that water up there. We don't want rainfall, snow melt, and all that. So it's not just the cover; it all includes a system to remove that surface water there to again protect the water quality. This is the primary water storage for the city. It's really a key part of the infrastructure here. Important to make sure we don't contaminate this water source, but it has the cover itself has reached the end of its useful life, and again, the state, is requiring that this be replaced as identified the age concerns of this particular component. Next. So a little bit about the project needs here. So a couple concerns here initially. So the current agreement that the city has with the Village of Derby Center does not provide enough water to support the long-term development in this area, and primarily the way this area within the city of Newport is zoned along the Derby Road up to the town of Derby line. And the other thing that it's not clear whether Derby even has the additional capacity to offer more water to Newport on the domestic side. And part of that is we don't know, they have source limitations up there. They have a water treatment facility. They have to meet redundancy requirements up there. So they may not even have us additional capacity to offer, and they may not want to offer it to the city anyways. They may want to keep that for their own development purposes, along the Derby Road and the Derby portion. Typically in this area, the city's used about 4,000 to 8,000 gallons per day. The maximum allocation from the village is 10,000 gallons per day. Potential limitations on whether the city can request more allocation on that moving forward. One of the major benefits of disconnecting or this separation here will reduce the long-term financial risks associated with the village water rates. The city's currently paying to the village a little bit less than $22,000 per year. You know, that includes the surcharge that we talked about previously. If the city's currently subsidizing these existing water customers along the Derby Road with what they're paying to the city. That surcharge for that reserve water allocation fee is for that excess water usage and is above and beyond what the city can control as far as expenses moving forward. One of the other concerns that's been raised is even though the Village of Derby Center is offering fire protection, that has been reliable and unreliable in the past. There was a fire a while ago, and Tom Bernier could speak more to this if there's any questions, but they couldn't get fire protection as needed, and they found out later that the valve in the structure was closed. So, that's also been raised as a concern, is whether they can get reliable fire protection from this point in Derby. And then construction of the new tank will allow the city to disconnect this entire portion of the water system from Derby Center. So the city will be able to provide both the domestic and fire flow demands to this area in Derby Road. Within the city of Newport, and obviously have control, they have additional capacity, so they'll be able to control their destiny here moving forward. So one of the things when we're looking at the project components, the state and USDA requires that we look at alternatives. This is a photo of the existing cover for the Palin Hill Reservoir. You can see the surface water on it, which isn't desirable. They did ask that we look at replacement of this with a new tank. That's of course, a 1.1 million gallon tank is incredibly costly. It's almost $3 million. And that would require additional land purchase. So then we looked further, trying to replace this existing liner and floating cover, and that's really the preferred approach for the city moving forward, because the cost is $400,000, versus almost $3 million. And we feel functionally this is still a good long-term investment for the city, and it's obviously at significantly less cost. So for the Seaside Derby service area storage tank alternatives, again, both the state and USDA require that we look at alternatives. We do have to pump the water from the existing Palin Hill Reservoir up to this area to provide the pressure. We did look at booster pumping options. The domestic we would have anyways, even with this approach. We did look to see if it made sense to do the booster pumping for the fire protection to raise concerns about getting power up there. You have multiple pumps, you need emergency power, it gets fairly complicated. So that's why, really a tank has been preferred up there. That's really a better, more cost-effective long-term approach here. So when we're looking at a storage tank, there's various types that we looked at. We looked at a standpipe that started at the ground. We looked at an elevated storage tank. We looked at different materials. For example, we look at welded steel. In this case, we're looking at a composite glass fused tank. And then, of course, we also look at various tank sites. We evaluate each of those. You can see here that 3 and actually a 4th tank site were looked at. 2 of these were located within the town of Derby, and that was one of the sites that was assumed back with the first bond vote, which raised some concerns. There was really a preference for having a storage tank within the city limits. So that's where the city kind of pursued and put their efforts here after that first bond vote had passed. So for the tank sites, evaluating costs, we're looking at the technical non-monetary criteria. And again, the priority was to really make sure this was located in the city. And when you're looking at these storage tanks versus a booster pump station, yeah, the tank initially is more costly, but these are 50-year plus decisions. The tank by gravity provides the fire protection of this. You don't have to worry about the additional pumping, the electrical cost, reliability here. So again, this is a better overall long-term approach. Next. So a little bit about the details for the storage tank and the components to serve this area. There's a site plan you can see to the right here. The different colors are really just the easement limits. If you can see up to the right a little ways, that's actually the entrance to the Walmart. So it's really just almost directly south of that location. And that's exactly where the town of Derby City Newport line is. So we would disconnect that portion of the water line from the Village of Derby Center, run a new 12-inch pipe transmission main south along the property line, and it'd be a 210,000 gallon storage tank located there. You can see a photo, give you a rough idea of how this tank would look. So basically there isn't any water in the bottom, kind of the concrete portion. All the water is stored for the fire protection and the domestic in the blue part of the tank. And that's elevated because what this tank does, it provides the pressure to this elevation, both again for domestic and fire flow versus the pumping component. About 210,000 gallons. Total tank height to the top would be about 75 feet. And we would also put a mixing system in the tank. Again, we want to make sure we maintain good water quality up there. There's not going to be a lot of demand on that in the early years, so we want to make sure we keep that water mixed. And we do have to pump up to this tank. We have to grab the water from the existing Palin Hill Reservoir and pump it through the existing water line up to here and into the tank, so we can, maintain the water level in this existing tank. Next. So a little bit about the water meters. There's a lot of benefits to water meters. The majority of public municipal water systems in Vermont do have water meters. Probably the city of Newport is one of the largest communities that still isn't fully metered. It's important to have all the customers metered just for equitable, fairness as far as rates and usage. The city has been very, very successful up to this point of, installing the water meters. They've been buying the meters. They've been doing that with city staff, and that's been very affordable and cost effective. As you'll see, the addition or finishing up those last water meters are expensive, and I'll kind of explain, why that is. Some of the benefits of water metering. Allows the city, after the meters are all put in, everybody's got a meter. You can develop a slightly different, improved rate structure. The objective of that is so it's more equitable than just a current flat fee rate. So you pay more based on what you're actually using versus everybody paying the same, regardless of how much you're using. It's important that all water customers, residential and also non-residential customers, all have water meters for consistent billing rates, especially the non-residential, which tend to be the higher water users. It also encourages water conservation, and that's got several benefits. If you're paying, more based on your actual usage, you're probably going to use less water. That reduces the need for pumping water, treating water. So that's going to help preserve, some of the capacity that the city has and help to reduce operating costs. It also gives customers more control of their water bills. So part of the billing structure will be on usage. So you can manage your usage, individually. And then the major last piece of why this was included in this project, why it wasn't before previously with the first bond vote, is if the city has fully metered system, it opens them up for federal funding, primarily for USDA, and that's not just for this project, that's also for water and sewer projects moving forward. Next slide. So a little bit about the water meter alternatives. The city, again, been very successful. They could do that with their own city staff, about 80 to 100 a year. Total of about a little bit over 1,800 service connections. There are about 765 remaining. In some cases, those are the tougher ones. So they can be the larger meters for the, some of the non-residential properties. In some cases, we may have a home that doesn't have a full foundation. So it's unheated below. So we have to put in what we call a meter pit. That's a small structure that has to be excavated, put in below grade with a meter. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see the costs here, but to finish up these meters, it's fairly expensive. The other thing that happens, because we're using USDA funding here, is whoever's installing the meters, the contractor has to be a licensed plumber, and they also have to comply with what we call the cross cutters, American iron, steel, and a lot of the federal funding program requirements. We're going to stick with the same meters that the city's been installing for continuity. They have the automatic read technology, no moving parts. We want to make sure that's consistent with what the city's been putting in and moving forward for future repairs and maintenance of this equipment. Next slide. So a brief overview of the project summary. We've kind of talked about all the individual components and details. So the first, obviously the highest priority is putting the new floating cover in the liner for the existing Palin Hill Reservoir. That's going to have to be taken out of service to do that. The objective, if the bond vote passes, is to do that this year. And then following next year would be the construction of the new elevated storage tank, the transmission main, the pipe to bring the water from Derby Road over to the new tank. That would include a small booster pump station to move the water from the Palin Hill Reservoir up to this new tank and into that existing service area. And then the following year, the last thing we really do is would finish up the installation of the water meters for those existing city customers that aren't currently metered, so the system will be fully metered. Estimated construction costs. So the first contract would be the work for the existing Palin Hill Reservoir. What we do is we extend the construction costs out to the projected date of start of construction. So contract number one would be about $406,000. Again, that would be done this year. Contract number two includes the storage tank, the transmission main, and the booster pump station for the domestic, about $2,422,000. Construction plan for 2022. And then the last piece would be contract three, would be the water meters, about $1,034,000. And again, that would be planned for the following year. And as I mentioned, part of the reason why the water meters, if you do the numbers, the city's been able to install many of those very cost effectively, but you've got all the federal program requirements, the licensed plumber, some of the more complicated installations. So that's why that number is, more costly than how the city's been able to do that over the last, 4 or 5 years. Then what we do is we put a total project cost summary. The recommended bond amount is the same as the total project cost, which is $4,985,000. Includes the construction of those three projects: the Palin Hill Reservoir, the new storage tank, and the water meters. Then we carry a 10% construction contingency. It includes engineering for the design, permitting, and then includes construction phase services for bid for each of these contracts, oversight to make sure we're meeting all the funding program requirements. And then we have allowances in here for permit fees, administrative, legal, short-term interest. So that gets us up to the $4,985,000 total. So moving forward, the decision was made to go with the USDA funding program, especially now that the entire system is going to be planned to be metered here. There was an application. Those are typically due once a year. They're due in the middle of December. So an RDFI application was submitted for this project back in the middle of December. The city does qualify for up to a 75% grant of the total project costs, but realistically, an average grant for this type of project, municipally funded project, is about 40%. Even though the application is in, USDA cannot provide a formal funding offer until the community's got a positive bond vote, so that wouldn't be able to come until after March. And of course, if the bond vote did pass, the remainder, separate from the grant, is a loan. Interest rates are, of course, at an all-time low right now. The city would qualify for the 1.75% 30-year term. With the term, we make sure that all the assets or all the improvements that we're looking at here meet or exceed that 30-year term. You don't want a longer term than what the life of those assets are. So we're comfortable with that 30-year. So the funding source scenario here, an estimated 40% grant, and the remainder of the costs are going to be the 30-year 1.75% loan. Estimated an annual loan payment of about $129,000. What's very important is that loan is going to be paid by the water customers, but as we'll mention here a little bit later, the entire city does vote on the entire project here for town meeting day. Projecting a little bit under $10, about $9.80 increase per quarter for a typical residential customer. So that's primarily there to cover the cost of that annual loan payment. Project schedule, so the bond votes planned for March 2nd. We want to get the cover replaced in the liner. The goal is to get that done this year. And then next year, we put the elevated tank, the booster pump station, transmission main out to bid early next year, so we can get good competitive construction pricing. So that would all be under construction, right up through October, November timeframe. And then the following year, we would actually start the water meter installation. So that's where people would be contacted by the contractor, and they'll work on those, and with a goal of getting all the meters installed and completed by the about October of 2023. So next steps, again, bond vote on March 2nd. All the city residents can vote on the bond, but just to keep in mind that the debt retirement and the costs associated with this project are going to be paid through the enterprise fund, which is through the water budget. So that's going to be paid by the city water customers. Here's the article, which includes the three major project components for the total of $4,985,000. Shall the general obligation bonds of the city of Newport an amount not to exceed $4,985,000, subject to reduction from available state and federal construction grants and aid and other financial assistance, be issued for the purpose of 1, constructing a water storage tank on the easterly side of the city, replacement of the Palin Hill Reservoir liner and floating cover, and 3, installation of remaining unmetered water service connections in the city, together with functionally related storage and transmission appurtenances and additions. Such improvements estimated to cost $4,985,000. And as I mentioned at the beginning, absentee early voting is highly encouraged. But if that doesn't work, then also in-person voting is available on March 2nd. Questions, and I'll turn it back over to Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Does any members of the council have any questions or comments?
Hello?
Yes.
I haven't done this before. Am I able to ask a question?
Not yet. I've got it to the city council. Right now, the city council, I've turned it and asked the city council first. And then then I'll ask, I'll open it up to the public in just a little bit.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead,
This
Mr.
is
Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, this is Melissa. So is Newport really the only large, well, as large as we are, that has a town or municipality that has a water system that isn't metered and isn't totally independent from any other municipality?
I'll let Wayne answer that.
Thanks.
So there's two parts to that question.
I'm getting a lot of feedback. If you're not speaking, please keep your microphone muted. I'm going to allow plenty of time for people to unmute and ask questions. But with all the feedback, it makes it very difficult to hear Wayne Elliott speak and answer questions. So once again, I'm asking if you are not speaking, please keep your microphone muted. Thank you.
So the first part of your question, I would say, yes, the city of Newport is probably one of the larger water systems in the state that is not fully metered. That probably applies to both medium and large systems. the second part of your question, no, it is not uncommon for a municipality to provide water or sewer service to an adjacent community. As currently, the city of Newport provides sewer service to the village of Derby Center. I'd say it's more common at the larger community provide water and sewer service to the adjacent smaller community. And if you get, some examples, St. Albans, the city of St. Albans provides water and sewer service to the town. Village of Swan, for example, provides water and sewer service to the town. So those arrangements are very common. But again, it's a function of, the working relationship of each community, the agreements in place, and, which community wants to have, obviously, control of their capacity and that allocation and growth moving forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Charbonneau, I believe you had a question.
I did, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
What is it's a 30-year loan. What's a life expectancy of, like, the reservoir cover and or the tower? Are they going to need significant repairs before the bond is paid off?
So I would say when you look at the overall infrastructure and the improvements, that everything absolutely has a greater useful life than 30 years. But when you drill down a little bit in each of the project components, we're very comfortable that the booster pump station, the elevated storage tank, and the transmission main, those things all have different useful lives. So the pipe, probably has 100 years. The elevated storage tank has 50 to 60 years, maybe even more. The building obviously has a very long useful life. The cover may have to be replaced, probably in about 20 years again. But we try to look at the average of, the investment and useful life here, to really kind of determine what the appropriate term for that loan is.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Wayne, the proposed water tower, that actually, in the grand scheme of things, has less maintenance than the existing one, because since it's glass, it doesn't need to be painted. Because I think the existing water tower, we have to budget for annual maintenance. We have a contract annually for someone to check the painting of it and things like that. So I'm assuming with this new cement structure and the glass actual water tank, there's a lot less maintenance.
Yeah, that's correct, Paul. It's a great point. So you have the elevated tank on the west side of the city, which is really just a welded steel tank. So that's a coating, interior, exterior coating, and that's something that needs to be redone on a pretty regular basis, in addition to just maintenance, between the more formal blasting and coatings. The elevated tank that's proposed, the bottom of that is a precast concrete, which isn't painted or coated, so that's got a great useful life, very low maintenance. And then the top portion where the water is a glass fused steel product. So that's a coating on the steel, so it doesn't require these coatings that the tank on the west side currently does.
Thank you. Was just curious on that. Other questions from members of the city council or comments?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Wilson here.
Go ahead.
As you know, we've been on this for 20 years now. We're trying to sell this to the public, that why we need it. I know Derby says they can provide all that we want, but we know that's not true. I think the people in Newport need to know that it was the city of Newport that put the entire system in, built the vault, put in all the fire hydrants that go up the road on the Walmart side, and that we pay the village of Derby rent on water meters and fire hydrants that we purchased and put in. And when you deal with them, it's like, well, I shouldn't say like dealing with a snake, but very unreliable. I would let, and it was brought up by the briefing about the building that burned down because we couldn't provide adequate water to put the fire out. But the people in Newport, I think, really need to know what a lousy deal we're trapped in, and that we pay rent for hydrants that we put in on the Derby side, so they have fire protection over there. You know, if people know this, and if they did know some of the dealings that have gone on in meetings that you and I and the former mayor Zilberger have met in the village of Derby, and only basically be told to get out, we're not talking to you. That maybe they'll have a realization that to control our own future, we do need this bond vote to go through. That's all I've got to say, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Mr. Wilson, that's an excellent point, because you and I went up there, and I remember they didn't even want to talk to us. We had a meeting set up, and all of a sudden we got there, and oh no, we're not meeting with you now. And so it's the negotiation aspect of trying to come to an amicable agreement has been difficult over the years. As Mr. Wilson stated, I can tell you there was twice we had handshakes that we thought we had an agreement. It was members of the council, members of the trustees. We shook on, like, I don't know what day of the week it was. I'll say a Wednesday. I don't remember the exact day of the week. We thought we had an agreement. 2 days later, we got a letter basically from their attorney saying there was no agreement. And so for that to happen twice, it's not very good negotiating. And you're right, we pay rent on the meter, on the fire hydrants that we install. And I look at it this way. Like you said, we need to control our own destiny, because right now we have to look 20 years out, 30 years out, and there's a large section of property on the east side of Newport that is primed for development. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Probably not, but we need to look to the long-term future. And the way I look at it is, if we can't control our own destiny, we can't possibly develop that property. How could we say to a potential developer, oh, we can provide the services, but then when we go to negotiate, say with the village, they could say no, and then we would be in a bind. And so there's 120 acres of both residential and commercial open property if you go up by the Palin Farm Reservoir. And that's potential for residential and also commercial development. And one thing we have to remember is we're looking to the future on this tower, and any potential development up there helps with the grand list. You need development to keep control on your grand list, and that is very important to remember. Yes, the water users will be paying for the bond, but in reality, we have all the resources to say to developers, we're open, we can provide the water and the sewer without any issues, and they develop. That will help the grand list grow, which in the long term helps, say, stabilize the tax rate. And so that is a key thing to development too. When you're proposing to developers, first thing they look at is to make sure you have enough resources. I know they look at hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth. And so, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's very important so that we control our own destiny.
Well said, and I would like to add to that, Mr. Mayor, that when we tried to negotiate with the village, and we were invited up to meet their lawyer and with our lawyer, we got into the meeting and they said, we've got nothing to say to you, goodbye.
Right.
So
Other comments or questions from council members? Okay. If there are none from the council members, does the city manager or public works director wish to add anything at this time?
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Thank you for
the invitation. One of the biggest messages I think Councilmember John Wilson hit very well is that we have a separation agreement. It was signed by the village trustees. There's no surprises in it. We've always been planning to separate. Everybody has known that this is coming. When the vote failed in November of 2017, our feedback was that the majority of voters were uncomfortable with a tower being in the neighboring municipality. We mobilized and found property within the city limits, so we're really pleased about that. Every council member from 1994 forward has been unanimous in moving in this direction, and that's a lot of different people who have sat on the board. This move is in the best interest of the city for now and in the future, and it's always been known about. There's been no secrets. The separation agreement is on our website on full display for everyone to read and realize what's in there. We have already made the $50,000 payment, assuming a successful bond vote, assuming we're able to stay on the calendar that's been presented in the PowerPoint. Upon disconnection, we will be making another $30,000 payment. One of the things that one has to question is why they're coming back for another bite at the apple when we have a separation agreement. And Tom is going to come in and speak about how important our sewer allocations are.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Yeah, I'd just like to elaborate on a little bit more on what the mayor and Mr. Wilson had talked about, trusting the village of Derby. I was involved in probably all of those same agreements with them, and we could never trust anything they said to us. One of the last couple things that happened to us, John Ward was still here, back in 2014. We have 5 properties on the Derby Road, just outside the industrial park, that we have not been able to hook up to our own water main. So in 2014, I requested that we hook up those 5 businesses that all have pressure systems in their buildings to supply the pressures needed. They gave us a informal yes to go ahead and do it. John Ward went to a trustees meeting and they verbally told him go ahead and hook them up. Well, a couple weeks later, I was actually doing the hookup at Elmwood, the old Elmwood Dairy building, when Marcel Karen was their operator at the time, and one of their trustees showed up right in the middle of our project and told us to cease operations, that we didn't have it in writing and that we could not hook up to our own water main. That was just one scenario. The second one was back in 2017. Tavern on the Hill wanted to do an expansion. They needed a larger water main line for a sprinkler system, which we were denied to hook them up for, and stopped her expansion that she had planned. It's just a couple scenarios of why anything they say we can never trust, and to battle with them over the water is kind of foolish. The bottom line to me, and as long as I've been here, is the village of Derby has 150,000 gallons a day of sewer allocation at our wastewater plant. Not quite sure where they're at right now as far as their usage. I'd say it's probably picking up around 100,000 a day. The bottom line is they need sewer allocation, and they can say they're going to give us water all they want and want to negotiate with us, but when it comes time to negotiate, if we need water, that's what they're going after. It's always been about our sewer allocation. To go back to 2007, when we upgraded our wastewater plant, we offered them 50,000 gallons of sewer allocation for $650,000, which they declined. At the time, they felt we should give them the whole 100,000 that we gained in the upgrade, that they deserved it and it was theirs. They actually tried to stop that project and thought they could get it. At the time, the city bonded for the additional $1 million to pay for that additional 100,000 gallons of treatment. these are just some of the scenarios through the years why the city needs to separate ourselves from the village. We, as the mayor had said, we need to steer our own destiny. And hopefully people will see what's going on and they will vote yes to the bond vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Other questions or comments from council members? Okay, I'm going to open it up to the floor. Don't everyone come at me at once. I have about 26 people on.
Paul?
So, yes, so for the record, when I call on you, I would like you to state your name and where you live before you speak, and so that'll be for the record. And with that, I would like to open it up to the floor.
Mr. Mayor, Ann
Yes.
Sherrillo here. I live on Stagecoach Drive.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a series of questions. They were asked back in 2017, most of them, and most of them were not answered. So it's unfair not to give us an estimate of what it will actually cost us, because it doesn't just cost us the loan when we put up a new water tower. It costs us operating costs, maintenance costs, and for instance, on the water treatment and pumping that we have right now, the utilities alone for that are budgeted, or were budgeted last year at $136,000. That's just for the utilities. So what I've been asking for consistently is, what are the operating costs for this new water tower, and what are the maintenance costs? Because the maintenance costs for our old tower are a $90,000 per year contract. So already we're up to 200 and some odd $1,000 in just utilities and a maintenance contract to the other water tower. So what about this water tower? What are its operating costs estimated to be, and what are its maintenance and repair costs? That's question one. Wayne, can I call you Wayne?
Excuse me, I will call on Mr. Elliott.
Fine.
Thank you. Because I'm the one running the meeting, and so I would like to have a little control of.
That's fine.
Okay. Wayne, could you answer the questions, maybe regarding the new tower? Because I know, as I said before, the maintenance is certainly going to be minimal.
So the major components of this, I guess we're talking about the booster pump station and the new storage tank. And initially, we're expecting the cost to be less to the city when factoring in the additional O&M cost. And part of that is because the city is paying this surcharge to Derby for the fire hydrants and these other items here. So we're expecting that to be less than it is now. But I would be glad, I don't have those numbers exactly with me, but I would be glad to provide some kind of more formal budget for the electric related items for operation of the booster pump station, and include anything for the water storage tank, if it's warranted in that first, 20 plus year life.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sherrillo, your next question?
What's the longevity of the West Side Tower? How soon are we going to realistically have to put up a new tower and pay for a bond on that tower? How old is it?
Wayne, my understanding is we're paying the annual maintenance for that, so in theory, you won't be putting up a new tower as long as you maintain it, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Paul. I mean, the city's investing in that regular maintenance program, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that, that isn't good for another 25, 30 years plus. I could maybe have Tom chime in on that too, but that's not on the radar as far as requiring replacement here for quite a period of time. As long as the regular maintenance is continued to be, and that investment is made on that existing tank.
Tom, would you like to add anything to that, regarding the west side tower?
I really honestly don't know what the life expectancy is of that tower. It was built in 1973. We're currently in a 15-year maintenance agreement for the tower. As Wayne said, as long as we keep maintaining that tower and it keeps its structural integrity, I can't see why it would last another 50 years.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Okay.
You mentioned the possibility of running a system off of a series of booster pumps, and you said it would have its costs too. But compared to a $5 million cost that we're talking about now, if you put in a series of booster pumps, what pressures would that give us, and how much would that cost instead of doing the water tower?
Wayne?
We do have those numbers as part of the report, and I would be glad to share those with you in the next public hearing. USDA, as part of the funder, does require we go through all those alternatives. But as I mentioned, for the city was able to acquire a piece of land in the city limits for the new storage tank. The booster pump station alternatives we did evaluate. They are less costly initially from a capital standpoint. However, it requires a much larger building, requires three-phase power, requires multiple pumps, requires emergency and that stuff is not used at all unless you had a fire. So there's always concerns with that approach from a reliability versus having that water sitting in a tank that's always ready to go by gravity. So even though in the next term of this loan it could be slightly less expensive from a capital cost, we feel that the storage tank is the right improvement or structure, I guess, for this service area for the long term. So that's really where the support for that tank comes from. In addition, the O&M cost, I know what you're concerned about for that pump station would be much more than what we would have for the elements that are proposed. You have multiple tanks in there, electrical costs, maintaining a larger generator, three-phase power and all those things. So if you're looking not just at the capital cost of that large booster pump station, that in itself is going to have a higher O&M cost over the next several years, compared to what we propose in this particular project.
The numbers that I'm talking about here are vital for the citizens to know prior to the vote, and the next meeting is right up against the vote. So I would really appreciate it if these numbers were put out to the public way before the next meeting. That's a comment. The other thing that concerns me is we don't have impact fees, to my understanding, in this town, and you have to have impact fees in place prior to building the structure, as I understand it, for anybody who's coming in subsequently to have to pay for some of the cost of this. In other words, all the citizens of Newport are going to foot the cost of this when the benefit of it will be to people who buy up on the Palin farm site, or build up in that direction, and less of a benefit to us, and yet they won't be paying any more for that benefit. It will be split amongst all of us, and I don't think that's fair. Unless you put in impact fees before we build this building.
Well, I'll answer that. There are pros and cons to impact fees. There are many studies that show impact fees deter development, and anyone who develops the property will be paying property taxes, and then they will be paying water and sewer rates. And so part of the water and sewer rates in the next, however, the life of the bond is actually part of their fees. And so they may not be paying the initial upfront, but they'll be paying in the long run. And so, I mean, we did discuss impact fees in the past on the council, but there's pros and cons to impact fees. And we chose not to implement impact fees. And so that was I just hope that kind of helps with that a little bit. And I keep going back that if they develop up there, it will grow the grand list, which helps every taxpayer in the city. Anything else before I open it up to someone else?
I think I probably have one more question, but I have to get it together, so I would ask you to let me come back and let you go on to other people.
No, that's okay. I want to give people plenty of time, and so, okay, who else has a question? Regarding the water tower, proposed water tower, cover and so on?
Hi. Is this a good time to ask a question?
Yes, if you could state your name and where you live for the record, please.
My name is Valerie Dillon, and I live on Farron Street in Newport City. And first, I want to thank everybody for all the hard work to get all this organized and provide a public meeting. Really appreciate it. Reliable water is important for a lot of things, and thank you. So you mentioned a concern about Derby Center having the capacity to continue to support our water needs, and that makes sense. So what about Newport City? Do we need to expand our well system and treatment or anything else to be able to expand and support this additional tower function? Thanks.
I'm going to let Wayne answer that.
So the answer to your question is no. The city does have adequate capacity, both with the water source and the treatment system. And just to kind of add to that, the other benefit of adding water meters is that, people are going to better manage their water usage. So that in itself is going to help preserve some of that capacity that the city currently has available down with the source and the water treatment facility.
Yeah, I was hoping that was the answer, and maybe we'll even find some more of those water leaks too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead, Woody.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, do we have Act 250 approval, or do we have to wait till the bond is voted in?
Wayne?
The RD apply application was submitted by the city back in middle of December. USDA cannot issue a formal funding offer until the community has a positive bond vote.
No, Wayne, I think it was regarding Act 250.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
No, we would not. We would not go through that at this stage. They need to have complete full design drawings and everything for the tank and the appearances and all that. So that would happen after the positive, after the bond vote passed.
And I guess you can assume that you'll get Act 250 approval?
Yeah, we would expect that. It's it's not significant, you know, that's typically triggered for the, for an expansion of a certain percentage. But it's already an existing service area. You know, the water's just being provided by it from a different direction. And, you know, even in the early years, the capacity is increased significantly to, you know, change the development patterns out there. So, no, we wouldn't expect there to be any kind of and of course the tank is located within the city limits too. So that hopefully would make it easier and a little bit smoother for getting the Act 250 approval.
Okay. Can I ask some more questions?
Yes, go right ahead. No, I want to allow plenty of time for questions.
Did I hear correctly from the city manager that the land has been purchased for $50,000? Was that correct?
There's an option to purchase property. We have a location, and there was an option. We had originally purchased land up in Derby, but we have an option on the piece of property in the city of Newport. It has not been purchased yet, but there was like a deposit made. I think Laura can correct me, but I think it was a $500 deposit on a piece of land.
That is correct, and this is Laura. The $50,000 reference was to the separation agreement. We paid that to the Derby Village trustees with as good faith effort as part of the separation agreement in August of 2017.
Okay. And the cost of the new water tower, does that include the cost of property that it'll be sitting on? Or is that a separate amount?
Wayne, I don't have that. Does that include the property?
It does include part of the property cost, the eligible portion of that, Paul, that's limited by the state and federal funding agency.
Okay. And Woody, one other thought, I thought of it today when I was speaking with the city manager about the whole thing. If we have a positive bond vote in this property in the city can then sell the property in Derby, and that money, granted we have a positive buyer, for that piece of property in Derby, that money could roll over right into this project.
Okay. And will there be additional property that we'll have to buy for the booster pump?
No.
Okay. And is there a guarantee with the tower as far as maintenance costs go, that maybe over the first year there shouldn't be any maintenance costs, or all those will be paid for by the individual that produces it and builds it?
Yes, that's correct. But one of the things that I offered to one of the early questions is there will be some operating electrical costs for the booster pump station, and we'll put an estimate together. Again, because of the surcharges the city is already paying to Derby, we're expecting, that to be still less than what the city's paying at this point in time.
Okay. And I'm assuming this is all or nothing. The Palin Reservoir, as well as these towers, this bond vote is for all those items. It's not separate, correct, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And
One
then
thing,
down.
Woody, I was just going to ask, when you brought up the thing about maintenance, just triggered something. I just thought of it. I want to ask, Wayne, what kind of warranty comes with the tower? Generally, I'm thinking of a manufacturer's warranty on some of the items. That Woody kind of triggered that in my thought process.
Yes, Paul. So everything here that's done, there would be a 1-year warranty from the date of completion. And I think there's a longer warranty on that, even storage tank. I don't have that at my fingertips, but I can definitely confirm that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Wilson?
Okay.
Can I make a comment or add to what Mr. Page has said?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did that too. I didn't mean to cut Woody off, but it popped into my head about a warranty.
Yeah, well, he had asked if it was an all or nothing. It's not really. If the bond vote goes down, we as a city are still gonna be required to fix the reservoir
At a tune of 406,000.
for, yes, 400,000, just, so, and then, we're still gonna have to foot some, costs for, purchasing the new meters, so, if the bond vote goes down, we're still gonna be on the hook for 2/3 of, what was briefed tonight.
Correct.
Okay, well, no, it was, I didn't think that, Mr. Page got the right answer when we said it was all or nothing.
Oh, yeah, you're right, because we are under the obligation to repair the cover. Okay.
The reservoir.
The reservoir.
Thank you.
Yes. Woody, sorry about that. It just, you trigger things that we think of.
No, that's fine. That's what we're all here for. Thank you, Councilmember Wilson. I was also wondering, since you triggered another idea that I have, is there an option for an extended warranty?
I'll let Wayne answer that.
Yeah, again, Woody, I'm not sure of that, but that's a question we'll ask, and we can have a response available for that.
And the cost, I guess, of that extended warranty. And then finally, if I may, if this bond is approved and we go ahead, is there any opportunity to cut the sewage allocation to Derby? Or is that something to consider in the future?
It would be a negotiation item. As Tom said, they have so much allocation, and I don't know if Tom said how close they are to reaching the maximum allocation, but eventually, depending on the growth in Derby, they may run out of allocation for the sewer. Now I can go back to a little history. I remember when the city council was approached by a developer who wanted the city to put in this infrastructure, and their project would be both in Newport and Derby. Well, they wanted us to put in this infrastructure for their project, but then they wouldn't guarantee that they would ever build in Newport. So I think Mr. Wilson might remember that one too, where we got kind of a cold, I never got really an answer. They wanted us to do all this for future development, but then they wouldn't give us any kind of guarantee of building in Newport. And so there's another case in point of people wanting the city to do things but not guaranteeing certain things. And so.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of the council.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Thank you. Next question.
Mr. Mayor, is this an appropriate time to ask some questions that are not related to the water tower and the bond?
Nope, we have not opened up the regular meeting. We are discussing the water tower and the bond only.
Okay.
At this time.
What number item on the agenda is the regular meeting for that?
The regular meetings, after this discussion, there will be comments by members of the public, item number 4.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions regarding the water tower?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, please state your name and where you live.
Bruce Amsden, I live on Camp Elizabeth Way. And I'm just curious a little bit more detail on the separation agreement that Laura talked about. Do I understand that you've already paid $50,000 to separate?
Yes, that was part of the negotiations. Basically, Laura can correct me, but after the court case, they basically directed the city and the village to come to some sort of agreement. And that was part of the agreement, was to come up with a separation agreement. And it was agreed to pay them $50,000. Laura can correct me if I'm going down the wrong path, but it was to pay them an initial $50,000. Part of the fees that we were paying them in the separation agreement was to make up for their potential loss of revenue. Laura, am I correct in kind of summarizing that?
You're 100% correct. And Bruce, if you go to our website and scroll down to the calendar, click on the meeting and you'll see the separation agreement right there. Take a look at that we gave up our 10% discount. So when the village trustees say that they're going to charge us the same as any other customer, that's part of the separation agreement. When they talk about free water for putting out fires, we're suspect about that because it has to go through a meter. And I would love it if you could put your eyes on that. And then as we come closer to disconnection, we will pay them another 30.
Okay, I guess my concern is we've already paid a separation fee and the bond has not been approved yet. And it seems like we're kind of separating before the city residents have voted to approve the bond. And what happens if the voters say no to the bond? Then we've separated, if that's what happens, and paid $50,000 already?
I believe that would be another negotiation with Derby to get that back. And given the history that we've seen with them, I think it would be quite an interesting negotiation.
A lot of this, Laura, if I'm not mistaken, has been led by the case in court too. And so that is all part of, I can't remember, I don't have in front of me the complete court ruling and all that, unfortunately, but there's I know in the city office there's a folder, I forget the thick. Am I correct, Laura?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll look at that agreement, Laura. Thank you for offering that up.
Yeah, and Bruce, if you have any questions as you go through it or need more documentation, just let me know. I can post more material on the website or send it to you directly.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
You bet.
Thank you. Other questions from members of the public?
Mr. Mayor, I have just...
Right, Ann, before I go back to you, Ann, can I just see if there's anyone else? Don't worry, I'm gonna call on you
Sure.
again, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions at this time or comments? I just want to make sure before I go
Mr.
back.
Mayor,
Oh,
this is Joseph Gretzer from the Chronicle,
okay,
and I'm curious, as I recall, when the interlocal agreement was signed, part of it allowed the town of Derby, or the village, to supply its Derby customers from the Newport constructed line. I rather assume part of that group of customers is Walmart. How will the village serve customers if there's a complete separation and you build the tower? Is that still going to be through the original line, or something else going to happen?
I can answer.
Mr. Mayor, Tom can answer that if that's okay.
that's perfect.
Yeah, hi Joe. Actually, Walmart isn't fed from the Derby Road. They actually ran a whole new line up to their tower off of the Quarry Road. So when the separation occurs, any Derby town customers would then become the city of Newport's water customers on that side of the road, on the Derby Road itself.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Other questions? Or comments? I just want to give everybody plenty of time. I'm scanning the list of people. Okay. If there aren't any, I will go back to Ann Sherlock.
Yeah, a couple of other questions. What is the capacity of the east side water tower in comparison to the west side water tower in gallons or?
Wayne?
The new tower is 210,000 gallons. And I may defer to Tom to make sure I get this number right about what the capacity of the west side tower is.
$750,000.
Thank you, Laura.
And I would be far more comfortable. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
I would be far more comfortable with all of this talk when we consider that the budget for the water component itself is about $1 million a year, which means the people who are paying for water are paying $1 million a year right now. And we'll be paying probably more when Wayne figures out what the numbers are for more operation and more maintenance. I would be very comfortable if the city council, sitting as water commissioners, would vote each year on the water budget, would have somebody come in and explain to them the water budget, and then make an actual vote. And I have heard you guys talk about this enterprise stuff before, but the reality is that there are costs in there, in the budget, including the capital costs each year, that somebody is putting in there and no one is voting on. I'm not asking to vote as a citizen. I understand that citizens don't vote on water, but you as water commissioners should be voting on that budget. And then I would feel that at least someone is as oversight on the costs, and then figures out how much we as people who pay for water should pay. And I think that's really important,
Okay,
especially when you have a new big thing coming in,
Okay, thank you.
possibly.
Other comments or questions from council members or anyone? If there are none, once again, Wayne, thank you. Maybe what you could do is for some of the questions, if we get the answers, what we could do is you could write it up in a format that we could post on the website. And with that, I thank you. And the next, we will have another hearing on this. It will actually be the night before town meeting, but we will hopefully have the questions posted on our website within like maybe a week or two. Is that reasonable, Wayne? It is okay. Perfect. Well, I thank Wayne, and I thank everyone. It was great questions, and this was very informative, and I hope that some of your questions were answered, and we will be able to answer the rest of them before the vote. And with that, we'll move on. The next item on the agenda is number 3, to approve the minutes of February 1st, 2021. And I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, Evan Charbonneau, I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Mr. Charbonneau. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Wilson.
Made by Mr. Charbonneau, seconded by Mr. Wilson to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Then, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
The ayes have it, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is comments by members of the public. This is where we allow members to comment on items which are not on the agenda. And I'm opening it up. Please state if anyone wants to make a comment for an item that's not on the agenda. All I ask is just state your name and where you live and your comment. And you have 2 minutes.
May I start, Mr. Mayor?
Who is this?
This is Julian Bullard. I live in East Charleston. May I start, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you may. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm not a city resident, but I have volunteered at many events, most of which were under the prior manager tenure.
Could I just say, but could I interrupt? You're breaking up. I'm not sure, it might be your internet connection, because there's a lot of hesitation on your video. Yeah, maybe turning your video off might help, because we were getting a lot of breakup. So go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to make sure you came through.
That's okay. It happens with everything. I try to Zoom in East Charleston. So I'm just trying to understand a few procedural things, Mr. Mayor. And as I read the city charter, all administration of municipal government affairs is vested in the council, which is made up of the mayor and the board of aldermen. My understanding from prior intra-department restructuring, which I observed, was that was something done in open public format in city council, and city council has to approve that in an open meeting with public comment. By restructuring, I mean changing department supervisor roles, employees' job descriptions, changing positions from one department to another. And I haven't found any change in my research to that procedure, but I would welcome somebody pointing me to that, because then I will at least understand what has been going on the past month. Further, as I read the executive session statute, which was posted on today's agenda, so also thank you for pointing that to me, because again, I do not practice municipal law, so I don't understand all of the ins and outs of it. But as I read that statute, there are 10 items for which the council public body can meet in executive session. While they do entail appointment and evaluation and also disciplinary action and dismissal of employees, they don't actually, my understanding as I read it, is it does not allow executive session to actually restructure interdepartment or intra-department parts of the government. And so I'm wondering if the current budget that is on attached to the agenda, at least for the March meeting, reflects any intra-department restructuring, inter or intra, so within each individual department or between departments, that is passed since last budget. I'm wondering if the city council has met in the last 2 to 3 months about restructuring, either within individual departments or in between departments. And I'm wondering if any restructuring occurs between now and March 1st or 2nd, if that will be reflected in a new budget, if it's not already reflected in the current one.
Okay, thank you for your comments. We will take it under advisement.
Is there a time I can expect to get an answer between now and the vote and the budget that's being voted on? Because I think that's the next meeting that's at least warned that I can see.
Well, basically, all I can say is we'll take it under advisement, and the only other thing is we do not discuss labor matters in public. That is not a public discussion when we're discussing employees and labor. That is
correct.
I'm not going to go back and forth. I'm basically stating that we will not negotiate or discuss employees or public in the public, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that's why I was asking procedurally, and I will look forward to your answers. Is there anywhere in the law that provides a time frame that you're required to get back to the public when you take matters under advisement? Again, I'm asking purely out of my ignorance in these statutes, and there's quite a bit of municipal law, so.
I'm not aware of any time frame.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other comments by members of the public? Then we will move on. New business. I do not have any. Mr. Ross, do you have any new business?
No new business.
Okay. Mr. Charbonneau, any new business?
No new business.
Ms. Pedersen, any new business?
No new business.
Mr. Wilson, any new business?
No new business.
Ms. Dogan, any new business?
No new business.
Does Mr. Johnson have any new business?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
It's the time of year for liquor licenses, and I had one here need to be approved tonight, from, American Legion. It's an ongoing liquor license. They have a first, third, and an outside, consumption permit. They're approved every year. And if the council approves these, they get a affirmative vote, they've got to come in and sign this liquor license so I can get it mailed out. So I need help to approve the liquor license of American Legion.
Now, I have a question. Probably I already know the answer, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Can the council designate one person to sign on their behalf, or does the state liquor control require every council member in their capacity as the liquor commissioner to sign it?
I don't know the real answer to that. All I can tell you is there's space for all council members, but I need at least 3.
Oh, okay. No, I was just thinking of efficiency. You know what I'm getting, but, okay. I was just thinking of efficiency if they just had one person, since I go in every day, you know, I didn't know, but, okay. So we would need a motion to approve the liquor license for, the American Legion.
Dan Ross, so moved.
Motion made by Mr. Ross. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Pedersen. Discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. So we'll have to all go in the next few days to sign it. At least 3 of us, so, that'll be okay.
I can be down there tomorrow to do it. I gotta go into the office, so.
I do too. I believe I gotta drop some paperwork off anyway, and so I'll be down tomorrow. Other new business?
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor. Just be aware there's gonna be a lot of these between now and the 1st of April.
Okay. Yes, it's that time of year, so, okay, good. Any other new business, Mr. Johnson?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. We'll move to old business. I don't have any old business. Mr. Ross?
No old business.
Mr. Charbonneau?
No old business.
Ms. Pedersen?
No old business.
Mr. Wilson?
No old business.
All right. Ms. Dogan?
No old business.
And Mr. Johnson?
No old business.
Sam, look at the camera.
Okay, no old business. Okay. And with that, the next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be Monday, March 1st at 6:30 p.m. This will be for the informational meeting about the annual meeting, and it will also be the final hearing on the bond, the water tower bond. And then the next meeting after that would be the annual meeting, which would be to act on other business. Everything is voted on by Australian ballot. It's been that way for years now. And then following the next regular council meeting after that will be Monday, March 15th. And the next meeting, March 1st, will be a remote meeting, because nothing has changed as far as the governor's executive orders. And with that, we need to move on. I believe I was told we do not need item number 8, which was the executive session for the evaluation of a public officer or employee. Am I correct, Laura?
That is correct.
Okay. And with that, we do need a motion for an executive session. It's the employment evaluation of the city manager, 1 VSA 313-3A3. And I will need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Mr. Charbonneau. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Pedersen to go into executive session. Discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Oh, the ayes have it. Motion carries. I'm going to put everybody on hold, and we're going into executive session.
This line is now on hold.
Okay, we are now out of executive session, and we need there's gonna be no action. We need a motion to adjourn at 8:17 PM.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Mr. Charbonneau. Is there a second?
Second.
I heard 2 seconds, so it was Melissa and Mr. Wilson. I heard them at the exact same time, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you. And
Good night.
Good night, everybody.